In this video, we will learn how to use Axios for making network requests using Node.js. So what is Axios? Axios is a promise-based HTTP client for the browser and Node.js. So if you're writing code in React or Angular or JavaScript, so at the browser end, we use Axios as the HTTP client. And we can also use Axios as an HTTP client in Node.js. So in this video, we will learn how to use Axios with Node.js. To install Axios, the npm install Axios. So go ahead and install Axios. Now we are familiar with the most common REST APIs, the GET, the POST, the PUT and the DELETE. So Axios as part of its methods supports all of them and also has other methods, which if you want to know, you can go ahead and read the documentation. In this video, we will focus on the common REST APIs. So if I want to use GET, I can just say axios.get and the URL that you're wanting, or we can give it like we are saying the URL and the parameters like we said here. So params : and the parameter value. We also have methods for post, put, delete, so which we will see as we progress. Axios is a promise based client. So how do we use it? So axios.get/user, params .then. So the typical promise syntax .then, and then there is a .catch. So if there is an error, it will go into the catch, otherwise it will go into the then, and the response that we get from the HTTP client, the response we get will come in the response and we can just log it. Similarly, if there is an error, it will come in the error. And typically, if we want to do something after it, if we say .then this will always get executed. So this is the typical syntax. Similarly, for a post, axios.post, the URL, the body that we want to post, and then the .then function response, then the catch, function error, and then if we want to do anything, which will always get executed. So let us do a few exercises using Axios, and the usage and the syntax will become much clearer. So develop a node server which serves the following REST APIs: get/myserver/customers, fetch data from get baseURL/customers. So what we will do, we will fetch the data from this URL and return it in the response to this. So we'll create a server wherein we will have these URLs /myserver/customers /myserver/products/myserver/orders, and the response that we will send, we will first fetch it by a get call, and the response we get, we will send it. Note, the node server fetches data from another server using REST APIs. So as we do it, it will become much clearer, and the base URL that we will use has been shared in the description. So let us come here. So this is a standard node server which is listening on the port 2410. And what do we need to define here? We will need to define those REST APIs. So before that, the first thing we need to do is we need to use Axios. So let's do require let Axios is equal to require Axios. Now we need to define our app.get, and what was the URL? myserver/customers. That was our URL /myserver/customers, function request, response. So now what we will do in the code, we have defined a base URL. In the video, in the description, the base URL would be given. Always use that base URL. So first we will need to fetch the data from the server. So we can just say axios.get get, and what is the URL? The base URL that we have given, plus slash customers. So that was the URL that we set in our task, base URL slash customers. So we will get it. Once we get it, then what do we say? Dot then function response. So this is our response. If we get the response, let's do two things. Let's say console.log response.data, and we can just send response.send response.data. So in the data field of the response, we will typically get the response. So let me maybe just also put in, say, a console.log response, and we do that. So this is our then. Now else we will put in a catch, and what should we say in the catch? Function error. Now what should we do in the error? If error dot response. So now our error can happen for multiple reasons. It could be that there is a network issue, the network times out, this URL is bad, or we get a response from the server. So we can just say error dot response. So if error dot response means we have gotten a response from the server, then we can just say let status comma status text error dot response. We can destructure these fields. Let's log them. And we can just say response dot status dot send status text. And if this is not the case, else what we can say, response dot status say 404 dot send error. So if it is not this kind of an error, we just send this. So we can now go ahead and test it. Let's do that. So here in our postman, let's define it localhost colon 2410 slash my server slash customers. So now you can see we have received the response. So we have gotten this array. If we go back and look here, what is our response? So this is our response, the standard HTTP response. And in this, here in the data, we get the data that we were looking for, which is why we have sent the response.data. Let me create an error here. Say, let's make it say customers 1. So now there would be nothing at that end. So now if I run this, let's see what do we get. So we get a not found. So we get a 404 not found. So if we go into the error, or we could have just said, let's also do a console.log error. Let's run it again. And this is our error that we get. So now in this error, you can see there is this response which has status and status text, which is what we have sent back. Now what could have been an error where we don't get this format of it? Let's maybe if I change this server, so let me say put a here, and now if I send it, let's see what do we get as the error. So let's run this code, and we get an error. So this is a different kind of an error because that server does not exist, and we get an error here. So what does that error here show? If we look at the message, so this is the error which tells us that this server did not exist. So hence we did not go in here, we went here, and this was the error we got. So these are different kinds of errors that we have here. So once we have done our customers, we can now similarly do app.get my server slash products. Now what will we get here? Similarly, we can say axios.get base URL plus slash products dot then, and now in the function dot response, what we can say? Console dot log response dot data response dot send response dot data dot catch function error if error dot response. So if there is an error dot response, we can destructure the status and the status text from the error dot response. Console dot log status comma status text, and we can just send response dot status dot send status text. And if this is not the case, response dot status 404 dot send. So we can do slash products. Let's test our slash products. So we get our products. Next, what do we need to do? We need to get the orders. So for orders, let's just copy this code. And this should work fine. So we get that URL and we just handle it. Let's test it. And we have gotten our orders. So here we have used Axios to fetch data from a different server and then send that data as part of the response. Next, what do we want to do? Add the following REST APIs: get slash my server slash orders customer slash colon cust. So given the customer, the name of the customer, we want to fetch the orders for that customer. Similarly, we want to do it for the product, and then we have slash my server slash orders question mark cust is equal to C1 and prod is equal to P1. So these are the three APIs we wanted to support. So the first one, let's say maybe I will just copy this code. So we have order slash customer slash colon cust. Let request dot params. So what can we say here? Let's say base URL slash orders slash customer slash, and what is our cust? This is our cust. So this is the URL we are fetching, and the rest of the code will remain the same. Let's test this out. /customer and say, let's say Jack. So we have gotten all the orders for Jack. Let's say if we make it say Jack 1, and we know there is no customer like Jack 1, so it should be an empty array, which is what we have gotten. Next, what do we need to do? We need to get it for the specified product. So let's define this /product and prod. Let's change the URL. So that's our URL, and the rest will work. Now, next, what do we want to do? We want to provide the question mark, cust and prod as query parameters. So now they will be a part of this /my server /orders. So let's get it here. Let cust prod is equal to request dot query. So now from the query we can get it. Now once we have gotten it, we need to send them as part of the params here. So let's construct our params. Let params be an empty JSON if cust. So if cust is truthy, params dot cust is equal to cust. So we set that value. And similarly, we can say if prod is truthy. So if prod was given, dot prod is equal to prod. Now once we have gotten it, we can just say what should be our params is params. So we provide this JSON as parameters, and now we can send it. Let's test it out. Cust is equal to Jack. So we get all the orders for Jack, and if we say and prod is equal to Pepsi, we get it for Pepsi. Let's say if we made it say Colgate, we get all the orders for Colgate. Let's make it something else, say Coke. We get the orders for Coke. Let me put it something which is not there. Let's say Red Bull. Now I know there are no orders for it. Let's test it out. So we get that. And we could have also said here prod is equal to Pepsi. And we get all the orders for Pepsi. And if we don't give anything, we should get all the orders, which is what we get. So this is working fine. Next, what do we want to do? Post /my server /orders. So we want to post this order. So let's define our post. So app.post my server /orders function request response. So what do we do here? We will get the body. Let body equal to request dot body. Once we have gotten the body, what do we need to do? Now we can just say Axios dot post base URL plus /orders, and we can provide it the body. and then we use the standard code dot then function response. And this is then the standard code console.log response.data response.send and dot catch function error, and we can just copy this code here, the standard code that we have for handling the error. So exactly the same thing we would do in this case. Let's test it. So it's a JSON, and what are the fields it has? It has name is say Jack, product is say Pepsi, quantity is say 10. Let's send it. So we get a bad request. Now why do we get a bad request? Let's maybe run the request here. So we get customer product quantity. So the field should have been customer here. Let's send it. And we have gotten that has gotten created. And now if we get all the orders for say customer slash Jack, we get this order. So we have successfully created this order. Next, let's look at another exercise. Define the following REST APIs: post slash my server 2 slash login. So we will log in into the server here, and like we were doing earlier, we will use another server. So we will use post base URL slash login. So like we did earlier, we have an skeleton code in Node, which is just defining the express, and let's now define it. So the first thing is let Axios is equal to require Axios. We have the base URL defined, and the base URL for this will also be provided in the description. So use that base URL. Now what do we need to define? App.post slash my server 2 slash login. Function request comma response, and we will use our standard code that we have been doing so far, axios.post base URL plus slash login, and we need the body. So let's first get the body from that. So let body is equal to request.body dot then function response, or we can use an arrow function here. Response goes to console.log response.data, and then we can just set response.send response.data dot catch error goes to, and we can standard that we have been using so far, if error dot response console dot, we will first destructure the let status comma status text equal to error dot response, and we can just set response. Let's first do a console.log status comma status text response dot status dot send status text, else response dot status 404 dot send error. So that's our standard code. Let's run this. So here in our post we are saying my server2 slash login, name is say George, password is say George. Let's send the request and we get an error here, HTTP invalid status code. Let's see, where do we get it? So we got a error here, we got a response, and this seems to be a token. So let's just put it into a text, make it a string. Now let's send it. And we have gotten the token. So at times you can get this kind of an error. It was sending it as a number and that was not going through. So you can convert it into a string and send it. Let's give it a wrong password, let's say, and let's say what do we get? We get an unauthorized 401. Next, what do we want to do? Add the following REST APIs: get slash my server2 slash messages, send token in the header field name authorization to the server, and where do we want to send it? Get base URL slash messages. So now let's do that. So let me just copy this code. So we are getting an app dot post. So in this case, let's use a logic that if the header is not there, if not token response dot send 404 dot status 401, let's call it, and say send no token found, provide a valid token. And if this is not the case, else, in our else we will do this code. So what do we do in our else? Let's get the body. Let body is equal to request dot body. We will just say Axios dot post. We will send it the body and then the headers. And rest will remain the same. Let's test it. So we need to do a post localhost my server2 messages. Now what's the message? Let's get a body from here. Raw, it's a JSON. So this is our body, and we don't send the ID, we just send the name, topic, and let's say testing JS, let's say. So now let's send this request, and we did not give a token, so we got a 401 no token found, provide a valid token. Let's give that token that we received from the post. And what do we get in this case? We get that this message was created. Now if we go and get all the messages, so we get this as ID 9, which was created. So here we posted it, and here in this code we also used a level of validation here. So if there was no token, instead of getting the response from that server, we just sent a response from here itself. So far we have seen how do we use it using the promise syntax. We can also use Axios with the async await syntax. So the get in this case would be let response is equal to await. We will await it, and Axios.get is the same. So instead of using the then, we just put it in a try and catch and we await it. So the standard async await and console.log, and the error, if there is an error, we will go into the catch block. Similarly for our post, so await Axios.post, and we will await it and then go into the catch block. So now what does it say? Develop a node server which serves the following REST API. So this is exactly the first exercise that we did. And what we want to do now is that instead of using the promise syntax, we want to use the async await syntax. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we have a standard boilerplate code for Node and Express. So let's say let Axios is equal to require Axios app.get / my server / customers function request comma response. So now what do we need to do? We will need to use a try and a catch. Within the try, what we are saying, let response is equal to await Axios.get base URL / customers. I think so it was customers. Let's just check it. It was customers. Console.log response.data send response.data. And otherwise we have a catch error. Now what do we do? If error.response, exactly the code that we were doing. And what do we do here in the error.response? If error.response, let's destructure it, status comma status text equal to error.response console.log, and we say dot status dot send else dot send. So this is very similar to the code we wrote, except that we are using an await here. Let's run this code. So we get an error. Await is only valid in an async function. So we know this rule, so we can use await only in an async function. So here we have a function here. It's not a named function, but it's a function. So we can just decorate this with async. Let's now run it again. And this is working fine. Let's now test it. So get slash customers. And we have gotten the customers. So this is the other approach, is using the async await approach that we have written. Now we can write the other codes. Let me just copy it. Slash products. So this is and slash orders. Let's test them. We get the products and we get the orders. Let's make an error here. So let's see if we make it say orders 1, then what will happen? So we get an error, and if we look here, we get an error here, 404 not found. So we can say error, so that we can see that it is coming here. Let's just put that. Let me restart it. So we get that error. So exactly the same way, if there is an error, it will just come into the catch block. Next, what do we want to do? Like we did earlier, customer slash colon cust, product slash colon prod, and then we have the query string parameters cust and prod with orders. Let's implement it. So let me just copy this code. Slash customer slash colon cust. Now what is our URL? It will be baseURL slash orders slash customer, and we need to get the, so we can just say let cust equal to request dot params, and the rest shall work exactly the same way. Similarly, let's define for the products, so product colon prod, let prod is equal to this, and the rest will work exactly the same way. The third would be in orders. Here we will need to make that change, so let's do that. Let's first make it orders. Let cust comma prod equal to request dot query. Let's define our params. Params is an empty JSON. If cust params dot cust equal to cust, if prod params dot prod is equal to prod. So in this JSON params, we have set up the values of cust and prod if they are tricky. We now need to send it. So params is params, and rest should work identically. Let's test it. So get order slash customer slash say Jack, and we get it for Jack. Let's say we say product and say Pepsi. So we get it for Pepsi. So that's the first part of our approach. Next, what do we want to test? Let's say question mark cast equal to Jack and prod is equal to Pepsi. So we get that value also. Next, what do we want to do? Add the following REST APIs: post the order / my server / orders. Let's go ahead and do that. So we will do an app.post my server / we need to get the body Axios.post. So this is our URL and we need to send the, and rest will work exactly the same way. Let's go ahead and test it. So let's do a post let's pick up say some order from here. Let's send this order. So this was the error. Let's remove the comma. And this order has been successfully posted. If I now do a get Jack cust is equal to Bob and product is equal to Maggie. So we get this order. So note how we made that change for the async await. So first we decorated this function with async. Then within a try and a catch, we used await. And then if there was an error, we used catch. So we have seen both the approaches as a promise with a then and then the async await